Hi there, this is Steven, and in this video I'm going to show you how to animate a cannon firing using Shape Tweens and motion tweening for the cannonball. I'm going to use a Shape Tween to modify the shape of the cannon, but I'm going to use a motion tween to animate the cannonball firing. And what I'm going to be doing is employing a lot of principles of animation to make sure that this looks believable and animated. One thing to point out is in real life, a cannon wouldn't modify its shape. It's very rigid and fires. I mean, it's the whole purpose and principle behind a cannon in the first place. But an animated cannon, I'm going to make it deform and sort of exaggerate so it'll look like an animated cannon rather than a more realistic cannon. So I'm going to add a little bit more life by doing that. So a couple things I wanted to point out. First, I've already drawn my cannon and the cannonball and the wheels. So I've really designed this cannon in different ways to make it really work for animation. And in Adobe Animate, one of the best ways you could do this is by creating layers. So what I did was for the wheels, I actually made them symbols and I put them on separate layers. If I double click on the wheel, you can see that it's a symbol, and then that symbol has a couple different layers to it. So I can, draw different elements of the wheel for this. The cannonballs are also symbols, so I can reuse the symbol multiple times. I can just go over to the library and add the cannonball and just duplicate it. So they're different instances on the scene. So I did want to add a different cannonball. It's the same symbol, but a different instance on a different layer. These are all on the same layer, so I can hide them. But this one's going to be motion tweened, so I had to put it on a separate layer, so it's going to be motion tweened. And then I, designed these rings, and I'm going to zoom into this a little bit. And I designed these rings around the cannon. Now, if you're doing this and you're creating a cannon, you can design it however you want. I just chose this particular design because it seemed interesting to me. So I've got a little front ring. I have the actual shape of the cannon, which is really just kind of a fill, and a cannon outline in the background. So if I hide everything, you can kind of see all the different elements. So I've got like this background that I'm eventually going to animate, and the cannon and the rings that go over it. Each one of these things I'm going to be animating using a shape tween, except for the cannonball, which I'll use a motion tween. And the reason why is so I can morph the shape. I can change the shape over time. Right now I just have my drawing on frame 1, but I'm going to extend my animation so it goes to frame 150. Now what I can do is go to the cannon layer. I can just go to frame 150 and I can right click and insert a frame there. So that gives me 150 frames, but the problem with that is everything else disappears. For now, it's not that big of a deal, but I want everything to line up to frame 150. So I'm just going to select down where everything meets at 150, and I'm going to insert a frame. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to just select, right click, insert frame. And so I have, every one of my layers is going to end at frame 150. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to focus on the main portion of the cannon at this point. The other parts I can animate later and do shape tweens with later. But for now, I'm going to focus on this because right now I think this is the most important. So the very first thing I do after I set how long my frame span is, it's going to end at 150. So all my animation will end at 150. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the frame span. I'm actually going to select the entire layer, right click on this frame span, and then go to create shape tween. Now, once that's done, the whole thing is a shape tween, but nothing's happening because I haven't set any other keyframes. One thing that's very different about doing shape tweening is it doesn't automatically keyframe your motion. So when you're doing a motion tween, if you just move it, if you move to a frame and then move it, you can just automatically add a keyframe. In this case, I can't do that. I can't just move it and get it to, keyframe. You'll even notice that I can't even move it. I can't do anything because I don't have a keyframe here that I can work with. So my very first thing to do would be to add a keyframe. Now, there's a couple different ways you could do this. One, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this animation a little bit of a pause at the start. So I'm going to hold down Option and select the very first keyframe, and I'm going to drag it over. And what this is going to do is it's going to hold that animation. In animation terminology, that is what's called a hold. And so it's not going to move at all. One thing you might notice right now is I had previously put a shape tween on this and added some shape hints so you can see this little green A is there, but I'm going to go ahead and remove it for now. I need to go there. If you're starting fresh, you wouldn't have to worry about this, but I'm just going to go ahead and remove it so you don't see that until I get to that point. So it now does nothing for 10 frames. It's just still, but now I can go through and make another keyframe. So I'm going to go say to about, I'll go to right around 20, 21. I want it to happen pretty quick. And I'm going to go to this button right here, which says Auto Insert Keyframe. If you click and hold on this button, you're going to see you have a couple different options. Keyframe, blank keyframe, frame, auto keyframe. Right now, I'm just leaving it on keyframe and auto keyframe. When I click this button, you're going to see it creates a keyframe. Now, it's not going to do the auto keyframe merely because it doesn't work on a Shape Tween, but it inserts this frame. It inserts a keyframe. Now, I could have done the same thing and just option dragged it over, which is why I was kind of saying that that is another option. I could just drag it over because it really does the same thing. It just duplicated whatever frame was there before. However, if I make a change here and then I try to option drag it somewhere else, it's going to hold that, whatever shape I've created. There's a couple ways to start animating on a Shape Tween. First of all, I'm going to show you that I sort of made it a little more complicated for myself because I separated these pieces into two. I have this sort of line that separates the two, and the Shape Tween is going to treat them like they're combined. So I've got to be really careful to not let them touch, otherwise things are going to get really out of control. But it will treat them as separate. You don't want to put, reason why I created a whole bunch of layers is I didn't want to, animate all this on the same layer. It's going to get really crazy really fast if you do that with a Shape Tween. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to go to the subselection tool and I can modify the shape. Notice that when I created these shapes, I made them very simple. The more points you have on this, the harder it's going to be to control. So I have made it a very basic shape and added a gradient and used the gradient tool to modify that. So I chose this tool and I created a shape. When you use that tool, you can modify how this gradient goes over your object. So I wanted to make it look like it was sort of the sun was shining on it and such. Again, design your Canon however you see fit, but this is how I decided to design this. So I'm going to come over here. I have to be right on that keyframe. If I'm not on the keyframe, I can't select anything. Well, make sure I'm on the sub-selection tool. I can't select anything, so I have to be right on top of that keyframe. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out these, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit closer so I can get a little bit closer to what I'm doing. I'm going to do a little squash and stretch as well as a little anticipation. So I'm going to modify this so it looks like the cannon is going back, pulling back before it fires off. And so I want to add a little squash and stretch to accentuate that. I want to make it look like it's pulling back and not losing volume, which is the idea behind squash and stretch. So I'm going to grab these, and I try to work with many points as possible. And I'm going to make it look like it's pulling back a little bit, right? And so if I like that look, now I can also change the gradient, but I'm going to leave it the way it is for right now. I'm going to try to scrub back and show you sometimes the shapes don't line up, right? It doesn't really remember how to get from here to here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some what's called shape hints, which I kind of showed a little bit earlier, how I had those shape hints before, and I'm going to add them to this to try to control how this cannon is morphing, right? How it's shape tweening from this shape to this shape, right? So what I have to do is I have to go back to the first keyframe before it starts doing the shape. Not the original, not the very first one, because there's no change from here to here, but I'm going to go, I want to control this motion right here, so I'm going back to that keyframe, right before it starts to get out of control. Now I'm going to go to Modify, I'm going to go to Shape, and I'm going to go to Add Shape Hint. Notice that this has a shortcut as Shift-Command-H. I'm on a Mac, so it's Command. If you're on a PC, it should be Shift-Control-H, right? I'm going to add a Shape Hint, and then I'm going to move this down. I'm going to actually place it right here where it curves. So sometimes it takes a little experimentation about where to put these shape hints, but I'm going to try right there first. Then I need to go to the next keyframe, right, where the shape is modifying to, and I'm going to place this on that line. When it turns green, you know that you've sort of hit the right spot. If it's red, you haven't hit the right spot. My advice is to try to keep this A kind of right near the same spot. So if I go here, If I go back to the first keyframe, you see that it's yellow, right? I'm going to try to keep it about the same spot, right? And you see that it's about the same spot. So I'm going to scrub back, and you notice that it's kind of keeping that, but everything else here is going a little wild. So I'm going to add another one. I'm going to go here, and again, that shortcut key was Shift Command H, or again on a PC, Shift Control H. So I'm going to move this down, and I'm going to get it here at the base of the cannon. I want to get it sort of right there. I'm going to go to the second keyframe, and I'm going to move that hopefully to about the right spot. And now let's see what that does. Now I've got a lot better control over it, right? Now it looks like it's trying to keep it arranged from there to there. So I'm going to be able to control how that expands. Now, if that's not working, like you can see there's some spots over here that are kind of expanding a little bit, right? I can add some more. So again, Shift Command H. I'm going to come down and bring this to about right there. And I'm going to go to this keyframe and again bring that point to about right there because it should be sort of expanding a little bit. And now let's look at that. It's doing a little bit, right? It's still doing a little bit of that. So I'll see if I can add another one, see how that works. Shift Command H, and I'll bring this, let's bring it right to the corner and see what happens if I bring it to the corner. And then bring that there. And now let's scrub back and forth. Now it gets really wonky, so that's clearly not a good place to put it. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and I'm going to move it down over here. Let's move it to this corner and see what happens. I'll come to this keyframe, move it down over here, get it to the same point. And now let's see, cleaned it up a lot nicer, right? I could do one over here too. What I would caution everybody is to not use too many shape hints, just use enough to get it to control it. So I'll move that there and I'll move this here and let's see what that does. That fixes it a little bit better. So I'm going to keep that. I think that's going to be pretty good. Right, and then I'm going to move over to this part of the cannon. And let's see if I can get this to work without using shape hints. So I'm going to move this over. I'm going to drag this out. Any change you make to this, again, you could probably paint out, or you can redraw or repaint your cannon design. But I'm going to see what it can do just modifying it, because I think it's going to be a little bit easier to control. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these out because again, I want to get a little or a lot of exaggeration as well as squash and stretch. So let's see. And actually, I'm going to do this together. Shift select that so I can move these together and move it straight back. And then I'm going to grab, I should probably grab all these together. And I'm going to move all of them back so it does this. So it really looks like it's accentuating that movement to get it to squash and stretch. And maybe that's a little too much, but I'm going to see how far I can push it. Right? And now I'm going to scrub back. And you can already see that it's breaking it here. This corner is doing pretty good. And this side over here is doing pretty good, but this one seems like it's breaking a little bit. You can kind of see it's not really working out right there. So again, go here, Shift Command H or Shift Control H again if you're on a PC. And then go to this keyframe, move it down over here, and let's see how that's working. And that actually cleaned it up pretty well, right? So I don't feel like I need much else. I'm going to fit into window just to kind of see this from afar. Right, and I'm getting some good squash and stretch, some anticipation going there, and then you can zoom in. So I think I've got it going pretty good for that anticipation, right? And I'm going to hold that for a couple frames. So I'm going to option and drag that, select that one, option drag it over a couple frames just to kind of hold that. And then I'm going to go a few more frames and I'm going to have the cannon firing out. So from here, I want to extend the cannon like it's firing off, like it's about to fire off, but I'm going to add some follow through, right? This other principle of animation, which is also exaggerated. It's the opposite of anticipation, where anticipation is pulling the cannon back and doing some squash and stretch or squash. I'm going to do stretch and overlapping action. So the cannon is about to fire off or when it's firing off. One easy way to do this is I'm going to again go to my original pose. And I'm going to go to Option and drag that key over. Let's go to about right here because I want it to go pretty fast, which brings me back to the original pose, which then I'm going to take further. So I can scrub back and you'll notice it's breaking, which probably it would. So I could fix that, or I could just get it to the pose that I want, which I'm going to do. I'm going to bring these in a little bit, right? I'm going to bring these in a little bit, right? And let's bring these in, right? Get it looking like it's really extending out, and I can fix that a bit, right? And I can even, what I think I'm going to do is, as it's doing that, I'm going to add a couple new points. Add a new point there. So the one worst thing about this pen tool is if I add a point, it's going to try to connect that point with another one if I just use the pen tool. So I switch to the subselection tool and then back to the pen tool to add another point, right? So let's put a point there, and let's put a point there. And now I'm going to go, I could still use the pen tool, but I'm going to use the selection tool to make it look like the cannonball is actually coming down the barrel of this thing. So I'm going to, kind of exaggerate this a little bit more. And let me zoom in just a little bit, make it look a little bit better, right? So now, and I'm going to bring up the cannonball, just kind of look at the size of it. So I'm going to bring that out a little bit because I want it to look like the cannonball's in there, which, you don't have to necessarily do, but it makes it look kind of cool, like the cannonball is actually causing a dent in the barrel itself. So I keep these points curved so that it doesn't look like, so it looks like it's deforming a little bit, right? So I'm going to do that. Hide the cannonball again because I don't need it right now. And I'm going to pull these in just a little bit, right? So to kind of, this is the reverse of the squash, it's the stretch, right? So I want to make it look like cannon is stretching a bit when it releases the ball. So I'm going to see what that looks like. And right now it's completely breaking, which is okay. We can fix that. So I'm going to add a couple more shape hints, and I'm going to start with the back here. Command Shift H or Control Shift H. I'm going to start with there. Doesn't have to line up to the previous ones because these are all new shape hints, right? So that's kind of controlling that. I'm going to do it again. Control Shift H or Command Shift H, depending on the machine you're on. I'm going to go here, move that down. Whoop, I do not want to grab that. Let me, here, go to the sub-selection tool. There. Now I'll go back. And if you can't see them anymore, if they sort of disappear, just go up to View and Show Shape Hints. And that will bring them back into view. So sometimes when you're working with them, they'll kind of disappear. So you could just do that to get them back. And I'm going to come back over here, put this one back again, put this one here. And now let's see. So it's got a pretty good amount of control. Again, I can add more to control this a little bit better if I wanted to. Let's see what this does. Right, and I think that that's a pretty good amount of control for that. I might want to add one over in that other corner. I'll do that. Just kind of keep them all aligned. And then bring that here. There we go. Now I've got a little bit more control. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here. Command Shift H. I'm going to put it in this corner. Go over here. Put it in this corner. Let's see if that fixed it up. Nope. So let's come over here. I'm going to put one in the middle of the front of the cannon there. And then we'll come over here. I'll put one up front. And again, go back. I know it's a lot of back and forth, but it does really help to get them all adjusted properly. So I come over here, put that one there, and let's see what that's doing. So it's doing a pretty good job, but I still think it can be better. Right, so I'm going to go back, put another one here, Go here, put it down here. Let's see what that does. That's doing pretty good, right? So it keeps it together pretty well. There's some spots that seem like they're getting a little out of control. So if I really wanted to, which I'll try, I'll stick one there. And while I'm at it, I'll stick one there. And then I'll come over here. And the worst thing about this is then you got to figure out which one is which. So you got to look at the little numbers on them. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. You got to see the little letters that are on them. So it's kind of hard to make out sometimes, but let's see if I'm going to back out and see if I did it right. Nope. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to move that one over here and this one over here. Let's see what that does. Nope. How about down here? Yeah. So I might just take those out because those seem to be, I'm not sure if they're actually doing any good or not. So I might just take out this one. And let's keep that one in. And I'll pull that one and I'll see if this one is the right one. So if I get it lined up properly, then it is. Right? So there we go. That's getting a little bit better. If I want to get rid of it, I just right click, remove hint, not remove all hints, but just that one, and it'll get rid of it. So then I don't have to worry about it. I have a pretty good shape tween going on with this cannon. I can still work on a little bit more, and I still think that over here it's doing something a little weird, but it's getting kind of the idea. And then what I'll do is as it's firing the cannon off, I'm adding another keyframe. And then I am going to, don't worry about these for right now. So in here, what I want to do is I'm going to bring this up. So like the cannon is firing off. So I'm going to pull this up this way. Missed one. Grab that one. And then bring all this up. So it looks like, you know, it's following along with the cannonball. Right? And you can see it kind of just shapes from one to the next. So I might want to put one in between too. So I'm just going to option drag from here over just to a couple frames. And then I'm going to select these again. And I'm going to move it up just a little bit, kind of halfway. So now now it looks like it's just following the cannonball up. And then I can do this again. Option, just drag it over a few frames, and then I am going to get in here pretty close, and I'm going to modify this so that these are going to be gone. Again, I can modify this however I want to and see what it's going from shape to shape, but again, try to use as few points as possible to kind of make this work. And then I'm going to do that, but then I'm going to take these, and I think I'm going to get rid of them. I think it'll make it look like it's the last stage of the cannon firing it out. Or I could, you know, grab these and go out with them just a little bit. Right? Take that one out just a little bit more. And now let's go out. Select all these. I'm going to move them up just a little bit more. So it looks like the cannonball is just sort of at that point in time leaving the cannon with a little bit of, you know, sort of acceleration at the end. Boom. Right? So that's kind of how I'm looking at it, my cannonball leaving the cannon. And then I'm going to go back to my original shape, and I'm going to bring, again, option drag, bring that over so that it's now settling. Boom. And now I see that I didn't take the barrel of my cannon out too far because it's just really at the point where it would be normal, right? But it's kind of returning back to normal here. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm actually going to make this a little bit longer. I'm going to select all these and kind of pull them out further. And I'm going to take these to give it this sort of illusion that it's really kind of pushing that cannonball out. Boom. All right, boom. which will be kind of interesting to have it do that at the very end, and then come back down and settle, right? And again, you can kind of see that this shape is getting a little weird, right? And so I'm going to throw in a couple of shape hints. I'll put one over here and then go here and then put that about right there. See if that tracks well. Good. And I think I could put one on the other side too. Put it there. Come over here. Put that right there, and let's see how that works. I think that looks a lot better. So I'm going to go out just a little bit, and we're going to play through the animation. Right? Now I have a pretty good follow through there. Right? And now I'm just going to add that cannonball in. So a couple things about animating the cannonball. One thing is you'll notice that when I designed this, the cannonball is above the layer of the cannon. If I just move it down below the cannon, it's going to be behind the cannon. For just now, I'm going to get it right there and then come over here, and that's when the cannonball should be launching, right? So I'm just going to move it right to there. And you'll notice doing that, it set a keyframe, right? All this is just the cannonball sitting there, but then when I move that, it automatically gave me a keyframe, but then left this here. So I don't need that at all because it's supposed to be hidden, right? It's supposed to be inside. I'm going to double click in the frame span here, and it selects the whole thing, and I'm going to right click and go to cut frames. And now they're going to be gone like that. It's like it doesn't exist until this point, which is exactly what I want. And now I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a motion tween, right? So it's going to give me, it's going to start my motion tween at that point. I'm then going to go, and you can animate this in multiple ways using a motion tween, but I'm going to go to the very end, or I'll go to about right here. And I'm going to move that cannonball sort of over here. And now I'm going to go about halfway or so, and I'm going to move that up. And now I can modify that path. Now, important thing to remember is that that cannonball is being fired straight out of the cannon, so it needs to go up at this sort of trajectory, but it also needs to move in an arc. So I'm going to choose the sub-selection tool. I'm going to go to this path. That's like my path of action, or the animation path, and I'm going to drag out some handles. Right? And again, when I do that, you're going to see that the path needs to be adjusted there, so it looks like the cannonball fires straight out. Now, you might notice that it drifted a little bit. So all I have to do is kind of get that thing back to where it needs to be. I just need to go to the free transform tool and choose the pivot point right there and then put it right back. And I'm going to get up close to this. And then move that pivot point to the center of that, and then it'll center the cannonball where it needs to be. Again, I'm going to go back to the sub-selection tool because that arc doesn't look quite right to me. It doesn't look like it was coming straight out of the cannon and arcing. And now let's look at what happens here. Boom, fires a cannon. Doesn't feel like it has a lot of speed to it. And it's running at 30 frames per second, so it's running at full time. So what I could do is modify the speed of this path. Unfortunately, I wanted to finish it up at frame 150, right? But it's moving kind of slow. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is selecting this whole thing and then just dragging kind of at the end to scale down the speed. So let's see, make it go faster. So let's try it again. Right? It still seems like it's moving kind of slow, so let's move it here. Now it should be moving pretty slow. I'm going to scale this back out. I'm going to hold down Shift, select the span, and I'm going to drag this back out a little bit, because I think what I can kind of do is control a little bit of the slow in, slow out. So I'm going to double click this, and I'm going to make sure that this is going to be sort of the slowest. It still needs to move a little bit in the X. I'm going to go to the Y, make sure that This is sort of the slowest it gets to. And then I'm going to add a point here to make sure it's going fast. And the same thing here. I'm going to pull this out, make sure that those are the fastest ones. You'll notice it changed up here, but I can then just modify that to make sure that it's going in the right direction. So I'm going to scale that just a little bit. Now let's see what's happening with the speed. There. Now it looks like it's got some, it's kind of hanging out there and then starts to speed up when it goes down to the ground. Boom. And maybe it's a little too slow when it gets up there. So I'm going to bring these in a little bit. Let's see what that looks like. Yep. So I'm going to drag this handle out just a little bit more. Looks like it's pretty good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to insert another frame so that the ball just kind of lands on the ground. Boom. And then I could add something like dirt falling off, or when it hits the ground, something can fly off or something like that. So I'm going to close that and bring this down just a little bit. Show all in. One thing I wanted to show with this is onion skinning. So you can see right here when you turn on onion skinning, you can actually see this little range show up, and there's two different colors. So you've got a color at the end of the action and before the action. So if I, move these little markers in and out, you can see that what's happening before and after are two different colors. So I can actually see what's happening before and see what's happening afterwards. And that can help you to tailor what's going on here. I'm going to scale this up just a little bit. So you can actually see what's happening before, and if I can actually change these colors. If I click and hold and go down to advanced settings, you'll actually see a little window that shows you the onion skin settings. So I can set, right now it says range, include the specified frames. You could say all frames, but range is where you set the range. This previous is the color of the frames before. You can see the little blue marker there, that's that color. The teal color is what is afterwards. So if I click the teal and I say make it red, I can actually see that a lot different. I could see what the blue is what happens before, the red is what happens after. And when I'm right on top of a keyframe, you'll kind of actually see it in gray, right? So I can actually lower the opacity for the starting frames, and then I can decrease that, right? Starting opacity and decrease by is the layers afterwards, right? You can reset the onion skin settings just by clicking reset. It goes back to its default settings, and then you can work with that if you want, or you can change those colors, but it also sets that range. So that's kind of the settings for this onion skinning. So you can actually go in and tweak what's going on in between. So if I zoom in, you can actually kind of scale this out and see what effect that's having over time, right? So I can actually see that, right? So if I turn that off, now I'm back and you can kind of see how that's working. And then I can add back in my wheels and the cannonballs and the background, which is down here. And then I'm going to move this cannonball that I've motion tweened behind the cannon. So all I have to do is move that layer, and now it looks like the cannonball is firing out of the cannon. Boom, right? So that pretty much gives you a basic rundown of how I can use shape tweening and shape hints to get a size or to change the shape of this cannon when it's firing off. And it's a pretty good technique to show how you can use shape tweening and shape hints to accomplish this.